Darian Zane wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted the pressure settings on his industrial-grade cleaning hose. The blazing twin suns of the desert planet Rethar beat down mercilessly on his broad shoulders as he methodically washed his beloved spacecraft, the Starwind. A compact but reliable vessel, the Starwind had been his home for the past 3 years. His worn tactical suit, minus the helmet and showing signs of battle damage, clung to his muscular frame. The semi-rusted armor panels reflected dull copper highlights under the harsh sunlight. His thick black beard and stubbled chin were matted with sweat, and his long hair, now untamed and wild, stuck to his neck in clumps. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk," he muttered, attacking a particularly resistant patch of space grime with a high-pressure spray. The powerful jet of water sliced through the muck, revealing the pristine hull beneath. That's when he heard it, a soft, melodic voice from behind him. "Excuse me, human male?" Darian spun around instinctively, keeping his finger on the hose trigger. What he saw nearly stole his breath away. Standing before him was a striking alien woman, possibly the most breathtaking being he'd ever encountered. Her skin shimmered a lustrous shade of gold, even though it was caked in thick reddish-brown mud. Long, straight silver hair, streaked with dirt, framed a face that was both otherworldly and strangely human-like. Her outfit was futuristic, a skimpy bodysuit, though it was so covered in mud that its original color was anyone's guess. "I couldn't help but notice your cleaning equipment," she said, gesturing toward his hose. Her voice carried a strange, otherworldly quality that sent pleasant shivers down his spine. "I find myself in quite the predicament. As you can see," she spread her arms, drawing attention to her muddy form, "would you be willing to assist me?" Darian's throat suddenly felt dry. "You want me to spray you?" he asked, his voice a little hoarse. With surprising enthusiasm, she responded, "Yes, please, hit me with your spray." His grip tightened on the hose. "Are you sure? The pressure's pretty high." "I can handle it," she assured him, flashing a confident smile that made his heart skip a beat. "I'm waiting, human male." He hesitated for a moment, then adjusted the pressure to its lowest setting. With considerable trepidation, he directed the spray toward her feet. As the cool water began washing away the mud, she let out a delighted laugh. "Don't worry about being gentle," she encouraged. Darian gradually moved the stream of water upward, watching as the layers of mud sloughed away, revealing more of her glowing skin. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until... "Oh," she gasped. The powerful jet of water struck the top of her outfit, dislodging it completely. Quickly, she crossed her arms over her chest, her golden skin flushing a lovely shade of rose gold. Darian immediately averted his gaze and cut off the water. "I'm so sorry, let me get that," he stammered, hurrying to retrieve the garment from where it had landed nearby. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground as he held it out to her. "Thank you," she murmured, accepting the garment with one hand while keeping her other arm across her chest. "I'm Sira Vale, by the way." "Darian Zane," he managed, still studying his boots. "And again, I'm really sorry about that." "Don't be," she said with a hint of amusement in her voice. "Sometimes the most interesting relationships start with a bit of awkwardness, don't you think?" Finally daring to look up, Darian found her fully clothed again, though her outfit clung to her form in ways that didn't help his concentration. She was watching him, her expression a mixture of amusement and something else, something that made his pulse quicken. "I suppose they do," he agreed, suddenly very aware that this encounter might turn out to be much more interesting than a simple spaceship washing. The twin suns had begun their descent toward the horizon, casting Rethar Station's sky in brilliant shades of amber and rose. Darian found himself still at the spacecraft washing station, even though the Starwind had been spotless for the past hour. He and Sira were seated on a maintenance bench, sharing stories and stealing glances at each other. "So you're telling me humans actually enjoy getting wet?" Sira asked, her tone fascinated. Her golden skin had dried to a mesmerizing sheen, and her silver hair now cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders. Darian chuckled, running a hand through his beard. "Haven't you heard of swimming or hot springs?" "Oh, we have similar concepts," she replied, leaning slightly closer. "But for my species, getting wet is usually more intimate." Her rose-gold blush returned, making Darian's heart race. "Is that why you asked me to spray you?" he teased, immediately regretting the boldness of his words. But Sira's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Perhaps I had multiple motivations," she purred, stretching languorously. Her still damp outfit clung to her curves, and Darian's mind briefly went blank. "You know," she continued, "in my culture when someone helps you clean, it's considered a gesture of deep trust and potential courtship. Darian nearly choked on his breath. You're joking. Not at all, she said, turning to face him fully. I'm quite serious about our customs, and very serious about you, Darian Zane. The air between them crackled with electric tension. Darian found himself lost in her mesmerizing eyes, which seemed to shimmer with shifting colors, like the aurora borealis. Tell me more about human courtship, Sira suggested, her fingers brushing against his arm. I find your species fascinating, so passionate, so physical. Darian cleared his throat, trying to compose himself. Well, it usually starts with getting to know each other. Sharing meals, talking, spending time together like we're doing now. Her smile was radiant. Yeah, he managed, his voice rougher than usual. Like this? Sira's hand found his, and her touch sent sparks through his entire body. And then what happens? She asked, her voice soft. Before Darian could respond, the station's evening chimes rang out, signaling the approach of night cycle. The maintenance area's lights began to dim automatically. I should probably go, Sira said, though she made no move to leave. Unless... Darian's heart thundered in his chest. Unless you'd like to continue this conversation somewhere more private, she suggested, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Perhaps over that human custom of sharing a meal? Darian stood and helped her to her feet. My ship has a decent galley. I make a mean space chili, spicy food. Sira's eyes lit up. Another human passion? I'm eager to experience it. They made their way to the Starwind, their hands still linked. Inside the ship, the soft ambient lighting created an intimate atmosphere. Darian prepared their meal while Sira explored the compact but comfortable living space. It's so, you, she commented, running her fingers along the worn but well-maintained surfaces. Strong, practical, with hidden depths. Hours passed like minutes as they shared the meal and more stories. Sira was fascinated by Earth's oceans, while Darian found himself enthralled by tales of her crystalline homeworld. The conversation flowed as naturally as the water from his hose. Chapter 2. A Taste of the Unknown. Darian sat across from Sira at the small dining table in the Starwind's galley, the smell of space chili still lingering in the air. The ship's artificial gravity kept things steady, but the ambience between them felt anything but ordinary. He took another sip of his drink, trying to ignore the way his pulse raced every time Sira's eyes met his. She had that effect on him, like a magnetic pull he couldn't quite escape, nor did he really want to. Your chili is remarkable, she said, savoring another bite of the spicy dish. Her golden skin shimmered in the soft lighting, her silver hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. It was almost too surreal, as though she were a creature from a dream. Glad you like it, Darian replied, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his lips. A recipe passed down from my grandmother. She always said food could tell you more about a person than words ever could. Sira raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. How so? He leaned back in his chair, absently tapping his fingers on the table. Well, for one, it shows how much effort someone's willing to put into something, or someone. You can tell a lot about their priorities based on how they cook, or how they don't. Sira's gaze softened, her lips curving into a small smile. I suppose your grandmother was wise, then? She was, Darian said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. He glanced out the window, where the distant stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the black void. And it's strange sometimes. I think about her every time I make something like this, even though she's gone now. Feels like a way to keep her close. There was a moment of silence between them, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable but full of unspoken things. Sira seemed to sense his quiet reflection and didn't rush to fill it. So, tell me about your world, Darian finally said, breaking the stillness. You mentioned crystals earlier. I'm curious. Sira's eyes lit up at the question, and she leaned in slightly, clearly eager to share. Ah, my world, she began, her voice filled with warmth. We call it Illyria. It's a planet that orbits 3 stars. The land is covered with vast, shimmering crystal forests, giant structures that grow from the ground like trees. They reflect the light of our stars in beautiful, shifting colors. It's like living inside a kaleidoscope. That sounds incredible, Darian murmured, imagining such a place. What's it like living in a forest of crystals? It's peaceful, surreal, Sira replied, her gaze distant as though she were remembering a far-off place. The crystals have unique properties. They sing when the wind blows like a soft melody. They hum with energy, giving life to the air. The people there are deeply connected to the land. We take only what we need, and in return the planet sustains us. Darian couldn't help but be captivated by the image she painted. Sounds almost perfect. Sira laughed softly, the sound light and musical. It's not perfect, Darian. Nothing is. Illyria is beautiful, but it's not without its struggles. Political tensions, scarcity of resources. My people are facing challenges that even the crystals can't heal. Her words, so matter-of-fact and grounded, brought Darian back to reality. He nodded, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his drink. I get it. Everywhere has its problems, he said quietly. Even Earth wasn't always the paradise people think it was. Every place has its dark side. Sira studied him for a long moment, her golden eyes searching. Tell me more about Earth then. What was it like before? The wars, the environmental collapse. Darian exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. The past had always been a complicated thing to revisit, but he found himself wanting to share. It wasn't all bad. There were some good times before the world fell apart. There were cities full of people, bustling, full of life. But greed, short-sightedness, it caught up with us. And now? Sira asked, her voice a whisper. What's Earth like now? It's rebuilding, Darian said, his gaze wandering to the viewport again, where the stars stretched endlessly into the void. Some places are trying to restore what was lost. New technologies, new ways of living. But the scars are deep. The planet isn't the same anymore. And neither are we. The Earth people, I mean. Do you think it can heal? She asked, a hint of empathy in her voice. Darian thought for a long moment. I want to believe it can. But I think it'll take more than just technology to fix things. It's going to take the people, maybe even entire generations, to realize what we lost and what we need to protect. And sometimes, I wonder if we're too late. Sira's gaze softened as she placed her hand gently over his on the table, grounding him in the moment. Her touch was warm, like the soft glow of her skin, and he found himself staring at her hand on his as if the simple gesture held more meaning than he could comprehend. You're not too late, Sira said quietly. No one ever truly is. You have to keep moving forward, no matter what the past was. Her words were simple, yet they held a weight to them that he felt deep in his chest. The way she spoke, there was a wisdom there that didn't feel human. It felt ancient, almost timeless. The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken, and Darian's heart beat faster. Thanks, Sira, he said softly, his voice a little thicker than before. Sira smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. You're welcome, Darian. A long silence fell over them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was expectant, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As the night stretched on, the conversation moved to lighter topics. Stories of her childhood, the adventures she'd had on her home planet, and more of Earth's bizarre customs. Time seemed to slip by unnoticed, until the soft hum of the Starwind system signaled the late hour. Well, Sira said, standing up, it's getting late and I should probably let you get some rest. Darian nodded, standing as well. Yeah, I guess you're right. But before she could make her way to the hatch, Sira turned back to him with that same mischievous smile. Unless you're up for another human custom? Darian raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Her grin grew wider, her golden eyes gleaming. How about a little stargazing? You don't mind, do you? Without waiting for a reply, she headed toward the hatch, her steps graceful, leaving Darian to follow her. As he stepped out onto the deck and joined her under the star-strewn sky, he couldn't help but feel like the night, just like everything else about Sira, was full of possibilities. Let me know if you'd like any changes or further details. Chapter 3 Beneath the Stars. The stars stretched out like a glittering ocean across the inky sky as Darian and Sira stepped onto the observation deck of the Starwind. The air outside was cool and crisp, the kind of breeze that carried the scent of distant planets and untold adventures. Above them, the twin moons of Redhar hung low, casting pale light across the barren landscape. Darian leaned against the railing, taking a deep breath of the night air, and looked out at the vastness before them. It was moments like this, in the silence of space, that made him feel small, yet strangely at peace. Sira stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the stars. She didn't seem to notice the chill in the air. Her golden skin shimmered in the moonlight, and her silver hair swayed gently with the breeze. She had a way of making everything around her feel more alive, more vibrant, like her presence was a natural extension of the universe itself. You ever wonder, Sira asked, her voice breaking the silence, if we're the only ones out here? I mean, with so many stars, so many worlds, it seems impossible that we could be alone. Darian glanced at her, surprised by the question. He'd thought about it plenty of times, but he hadn't expected to hear it from her, not so soon. I don't know, he said honestly. I used to think we were alone. That Earth was the only place that mattered. But the more I've traveled, the more I realize how much is out there. I don't think we're alone. Maybe we never were. Sira nodded slowly, her eyes distant as she seemed to weigh his words. I used to think the same. Illyria was all I knew, and we didn't even have the technology to search the stars. It wasn't until I left and saw the vastness of the universe for myself that I truly understood how small we are, and how interconnected everything is. Darian felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. There was something hauntingly poetic about the way she spoke of the universe, something that made him feel like he had only scratched the surface of what she understood. He wondered how much of her knowledge was ancient, passed down through generations, woven into the very fabric of her species. Is it hard? Darian asked, his voice soft. Leaving home? Sira's gaze shifted to him, her golden eyes gleaming under the starlight. Yes, she said, her tone uncharacteristically serious. But also no. My people are wanderers by nature. We seek knowledge, explore the unknown. It's in our blood. But, leaving Illyria, seeing it from the outside for the first time, it was like seeing it for what it really was. Beautiful, yes, but full of its own faults. Darian could hear the faintest trace of sadness in her voice. What happened to your world? He asked, his curiosity piqued. Sira sighed, looking back toward the distant horizon, her expression clouded for a moment. Illyria is dying, she said quietly. Not in the way you might think. The crystals that give us life, the energy that powers our planet, is running low. The land is shifting and the balance is faltering. For centuries we've relied on the crystals to sustain us. But now they're weakening, and we're not sure why. Darian didn't know what to say. The weight of her words hit him hard. I'm sorry, Sira, he murmured. I didn't realize. Sira turned to him, a faint smile playing on her lips. It's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done. Just the way of things. Everything has its time. Even planets. He didn't respond immediately, but the thought lingered. Was the same true for humanity? Was Earth simply another planet that had outlived its prime? He shook the thought away. It didn't matter. What mattered was the here and now, the present moment they were sharing under the stars. Sira turned her attention back to the sky, her fingers idly tracing the railing. I've seen many worlds, she said, her voice quieter now, but there's something special about this one. About Earth. Your people, your history. It's full of passion and contradiction. It's chaotic, but there's something beautiful in that chaos. Darian glanced at her, surprised by her insight. You think so? I know so, Sira said with certainty. You humans are so full of potential. You could do incredible things. If only you learned to work together to stop destroying each other. That's the real challenge, isn't it? Not the stars, not the planets, but the people. He let out a small laugh, though it was tinged with bitterness. Yeah, tell me about it. We've been our own worst enemies for centuries. But you're trying, Sira said, turning to face him fully. I can see it. That's why I'm here with you. You're not just a soldier. You're not just a traveler. You're someone who's trying to make a difference. And that matters. Her words struck him harder than he expected. He didn't know how she could see through him like that, how she could tell so much about him from so little. But it felt good to hear it, even if he wasn't sure if he was ready to accept it. I don't know about that, he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. I'm just a guy trying to get by, you know? Trying to fix things as I go. Sira smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. That's exactly how it starts. One small step at a time. The stars overhead twinkled like distant promises, like 1,000 futures just waiting to be realized. And for the first time in a long while, Darian felt a spark of hope deep inside him. Maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out. Maybe they could fix things together. Maybe you're right, he said quietly, looking at her. Maybe we can fix things. Sira smiled, the night air swirling around them as she stepped closer, her presence warm and inviting. One step at a time, Darian. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was companionable, charged with an unspoken understanding. The stars glittered above them, casting their light down on the small, quiet corner of the universe where two wanderers had found each other. And in that moment, Darian knew this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of them had expected. Chapter 4. Paths Diverge. The night stretched on as Darian and Sira remained on the observation deck, their gazes fixed on the unending expanse of space. It was as if the stars themselves had woven a blanket of silence around them, keeping the rest of the universe at bay. Darian, despite the weight of their conversation, found himself at ease in Sira's presence. She had a way of making him feel like he wasn't alone, like the weight of the universe could be shared, even in the quietest moments. But all too soon, The calm was broken by the unmistakable hum of the Starwind systems powering up. The soft chime of an alert echoed through the ship's speakers, breaking the peaceful atmosphere like a sudden storm. Darian glanced toward the hatch, his expression hardening. "I guess it's time to face reality," he muttered, pushing himself away from the railing. "We're not the only ones out here." Sira turned to follow his gaze, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but alert. "Sounds like a transmission," Darian replied, moving toward the console near the hatch. "From the station maybe. Or someone else entirely." He tapped a few buttons and the ship's communication system flickered to life. Static crackled for a moment before a voice came through, distorted but still clear enough for Darian to recognize. "This is Captain Talos of the Vanguard. We have you in our sights, Starwind. Prepare for boarding." Sira's eyes narrowed. "That name? Vanguard? They're not a friendly crew." Darian cursed under his breath. He'd heard of the Vanguard, pirates, mercenaries, ruthless and unpredictable. They didn't care for the law, only for profit. And the Starwind, with its modest yet advanced tech, was the perfect target. "We're not in a position to fight them off," Darian muttered, glancing back at Sira. "We need to get out of here before they board." Sira's expression hardened. "I can handle myself," she said with quiet confidence, stepping toward him. "But your ship, can it outrun them?" Darian hesitated. The Starwind wasn't built for speed, not compared to a vessel like the Vanguard. But it wasn't just about speed, it was about strategy. And right now Darian needed a plan. "I'll try," he said, tapping the controls. "But you might want to brace yourself." He activated the ship's engines, sending the Starwind into a sharp turn, its hull groaning as the momentum shifted. The Vanguard signal flickered again and Darian could see it now, a dark silhouette closing in fast on their position. They were dangerously close. "Get ready, Sira," he warned, his heart pounding. "If we're going to survive this, we need to move quickly." Sira nodded, her silver eyes gleaming with resolve. She stepped forward, positioning herself near the weapons station. Her presence was calm, methodical, as though she had been in situations like this before. Darian couldn't help but admire the way she carried herself. She wasn't afraid, not like him. "Let's do this," she said, her voice low. Darian gritted his teeth and hit the thrusters, pushing the Starwind into overdrive. The ship jolted forward, narrowly avoiding the Vanguard's incoming fire. He veered the ship left, sending them into a sharp dive toward the planet's surface. "We'll lose them in the atmosphere," he said through clenched teeth. "But I need to make sure they don't follow." Sira didn't respond, but he could feel the energy shift as she moved to the rear of the ship. A faint hum filled the air, and Darian glanced over his shoulder just in time to see the laser cannons on the Starwind flare to life. The soft blue glow of the weapons streaked across the dark sky, narrowly missing the Vanguard as it continued to give chase. "Don't think you can outrun me, Starwind," came Captain Talos' voice again, now clearer, taunting. "You can't hide forever." Darian's stomach twisted. He could hear the confidence in the pirate's voice. Talos was playing with them, and Darian knew that if they didn't make a clean getaway soon, it would be over. "I can't keep this up forever," he muttered, his hands dancing across the controls, trying to outmaneuver the Vanguard. "We need to lose them now or they'll track us to the planet." Sira's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Darian, stop. Let me help." Before he could ask what she meant, she activated the ship's auxiliary system, rerouting power to the cloaking mechanism. The Starwind systems hummed as the cloaking field activated, blending the ship with the surrounding stars and atmospheric cloud cover. Darian blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. "How did you?" "I told you," she said with a grin. "I've seen a lot of things." The Starwind shuddered briefly before it became nearly invisible against the backdrop of the vastness of space. The Vanguard's pursuit light flickered for a moment, unable to lock onto their position. "We're in the clear," Sira said, her voice steady. Darian let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was too close. Sira turned toward him, her golden eyes reflecting the dim glow of the ship's interior lights. There was no fear in her gaze, only resolve. "You didn't give up," she said, a quiet admiration in her voice. "I knew you wouldn't." Darian met her gaze and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. The Vanguard, the danger, even the planet below, they were all just distant things now. It was only him and Sira, standing in the wake of the chaos they had survived. "I wasn't going to give up on you," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Sira's lips curled into a smile, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she placed her hand on his arm, her touch gentle and warm. The tension between them, once thick and uncertain, seemed to shift, becoming something unspoken but understood. For a moment they both stood there in the quiet of the Starwind, their hearts beating in sync, their paths diverging and yet somehow coming together. But the universe had a way of throwing them into unpredictable situations. And the future, however uncertain, was far from decided. Chapter 5. The Last Horizon. The quiet hum of the Starwind filled the cockpit, broken only by the occasional beeping of the ship's systems as Darian and Sira sailed through the emptiness of space. They had managed to shake the Vanguard, for now. But Darian knew better than to think they were truly safe. Pirates like Talos wouldn't give up easily. It was only a matter of time before they found them again. Sira, as always, was calm, her golden eyes studying the screens in front of her. She hadn't said much since the Vanguard had been thrown off their tail. Darian could sense the weight of something unspoken between them, but he wasn't sure what it was. Whatever it was, it lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. "You've been quiet," he said finally, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Sira turned her gaze toward him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, Darian thought she might not answer, but then she spoke, her voice softer than he expected. "Do you ever think about the past, Darian? About where you came from, the life you left behind?" Darian stiffened slightly, not expecting that kind of question. He hadn't thought about Earth in a long time, not in a way that mattered. Sure, he remembered the planet, the cities, the people. But they felt distant now, like fragments of a dream fading with time. He looked out the viewport, watching the stars blur as they drifted further from Redhar. "Sometimes," he said. "But it doesn't feel like it's mine anymore. Too much has changed." Sira nodded, her fingers lightly tapping the console. "I get that. Illyria isn't what it used to be either. I can't go back, not now. My home is lost in a way. But that doesn't mean the journey is over." Darian turned toward her, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Her lips curled into a half-smile, but there was a sadness behind her eyes. "I mean, I don't know where I belong anymore. I'm still searching for a place, a purpose. But I do know one thing." "What's that?" Sira's gaze locked with his, steady and intense. "I'm not alone anymore." For the first time since he'd met her, Darian saw the vulnerability in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there, like a crack in an otherwise impenetrable facade. Before he could respond, the ship's alarm suddenly blared to life, the loud, harsh sound cutting through the stillness of the cockpit. "Incoming ship," the system's voice called out. "Unidentified vessel. Preparing for intercept." Darian's heart skipped a beat. The Vanguard? It couldn't be. He'd thought they'd lost the trail. He immediately slapped the controls, trying to steer the ship away, but the mysterious vessel was already in their path. A massive, shadowy shape emerged from the dark, its silhouette silhouetted against the distant stars. "This is Captain Talos of the Vanguard," a distorted voice crackled over the comms. "You didn't think you could outrun us forever, did you, Starwind? Prepare to be boarded. This time you won't escape." Darian cursed under his breath. "We don't have a choice," he muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "We can't outrun them again." Sira stood beside him, her face set with resolve. "Then we fight. We have no other option." A wave of adrenaline coursed through Darian's veins. He had always known it would come to this. They couldn't just keep running. The Vanguard would hunt them down, and sooner or later, they'd have to face the consequences. Sira's voice broke through his thoughts again. "Darian, I trust you." He looked up at her, his pulse racing. "We're not giving up, Sira. Not today." The Vanguard ship fired first, a barrage of laser beams slamming into the Starwind's shields. The ship jolted under the impact, but the shields held. "Barely. We can't keep this up," Darian said, his mind racing. The Starwind wasn't built for direct combat. Its defensive systems were strong, but they weren't designed to withstand an extended firefight. He veered sharply to the left, narrowly dodging another attack from the Vanguard. "Sira, I need you to help me take out their engines. We can't fight them head-on, but if we disable their ship—" "I'm already on it," she interrupted, her fingers flying over the secondary console as the ship's weapons came to life. The soft hum of the cannons charging filled the air, and Sira adjusted the targeting system, her eyes focused. "Ready?" Darian didn't hesitate. He targeted the Vanguard's engines, lining up a shot. The weapons fired, striking the enemy ship's propulsion system with pinpoint accuracy. The Vanguard's engines flickered and sputtered, but the ship didn't go down. It began to maneuver more erratically, trying to adjust its course. "We've done it," Darian said, a sharp breath escaping him. "We've disabled their engines. But they're still coming?" Sira glanced at him, and for a brief moment, he saw a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. "We'll finish this." And finish it they did. The Vanguard, now crippled and unable to pursue, fired one final shot. But it was too late. The Starwind veered one last time, narrowly dodging the blast, before Sira fired the final shot from their weapons array. A bright explosion lit up the space between them. The Vanguard ship erupted in a cascade of sparks and debris, its engines completely destroyed. The threat had been eliminated. Darian slumped in his seat, the adrenaline fading as the comms went quiet. He exhaled deeply, the tension in his shoulders finally releasing. Sira stood beside him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glimmered with something like pride. "You did it," she said softly. He nodded, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "We did it." For a moment, the two of them sat in the stillness of the cockpit, their hearts slowing to a more reasonable rhythm. The stars stretched out before them, offering no answers, no guarantees. But Darian knew one thing for certain now. Whatever path lay ahead, he wouldn't be walking it alone. The Starwind had survived, but it had also changed. And so had he. As the ship drifted through the void, the journey was far from over. But this time he was ready. The horizon may have been distant, but with Sira at his side, Darian knew they could face whatever came next.